The Galactic Union press release sounded confident, almost smug. A limited punitive action has been authorized against the newly discovered Terran species, it declared to a room full of applauding delegates. Humanity has repeatedly violated trade boundaries, ignored containment advisories, and demonstrated dangerous levels of adaptability. Dangerous, yes. Humans came from a Class 12 Deathworld, a planet where almost everything was actively trying to kill them. But this was hardly unprecedented. The Union had faced down far worse threats in its long history and had always come out on top. They believed they were crushing yet another upstart species. What the public press release did unmention was the title of the classified briefing being circulated among High Command. Congratulations, you just started a war with the galaxy's deadliest creatures. The first strike was, by all accounts, flawless. 3 of the Union's finest fleets translated into the Sol system, their primary targets being Earth's outer defense platforms. Precision plasma lances sliced through satellites like they were made of paper. Kinetic rods, silent and unstoppable, shattered the shipyards orbiting the moon. Across the human system, communications went dark. Union observers watching from a safe distance congratulated themselves on a job well done. Efficient, murmured Admiral Kelt of the Verex Dominion, a hint of admiration in his voice. They never even fired back. That was mistake number 1. Humans didn't respond with panicked broadcasts or desperate pleas. They responded with absolute silence. For exactly 12 minutes, the entire system was a ghost town. Then, every single ship in the Union fleets received the same message, broadcast on all frequencies, open and unencrypted. There were no threats, no posturing, just 2 simple words, message received, and then, the real war began. But it wasn't the counterattack the Union expected. Instead of a direct assault, humanity simply adapted. Union commanders watched their tactical displays in utter confusion as human vessels began appearing on their scopes. They weren't jumping from established hyperspace lanes. They were emerging from unstable gravity, whilst chaotic, unpredictable pockets of space-time that no sane species would ever dream of navigating. The ships themselves were a chaotic sight, scarred, mismatched, and clearly modified in real time. One terrified analyst whispered, "They're changing designs mid." His superior replied, his voice shaking, "They always do." The first real engagement shattered Union military doctrine, a doctrine that had been honed over centuries of galactic warfare. Human ships didn't waste their time trying to punch through powerful energy shields. They targeted logistics. Fuel tenders, the lifeblood of the fleet, vanished in silent flashes of light. Supply relays, critical for resupplying munitions, exploded one by one. Repair ships, vital for keeping the fleet in fighting shape, were boarded by humans wearing what looked like crude, hastily welded armor and carrying projectile weapons. Primitive firearms against elite Union Marines with plasma shields and energy rifles. It should have been a slaughter. But the projectile weapons worked, because humans didn't fight clean. They didn't follow the established rules of engagement. They fought to win, by any means necessary. On the ground it was even worse. Union shock troops, the best of the best, landed in zones that their pre-invasion scans had identified as low-threat civilian areas. They expected to meet little to no resistance, a simple mop-up operation. Instead, they found farmers with high-powered hunting rifles, who knew their land like the back of their hand. They found construction workers who turned their tools into deadly improvised explosives. They found elderly citizens, grandmothers and grandfathers, coordinating ambushes with a level of military precision that would make a general proud. One captured Verex officer, after his interrogation, testified with a haunted look in his eyes. They fought like predators who had been hunted before, and had learned every trick in the book, desperate to gain an edge. The Union deployed their ultimate weapon, bioagents, meticulously calibrated to Terran physiology. It was a war crime, but they were past caring. They expected a swift, silent end to the ground war. Instead, humanity did something no one in the galaxy could have possibly predicted. They modified themselves. Emergency gene therapies, developed and deployed within days, rewrote their biology to neutralize the bioweapons. Experimental combat stimulants pushed their bodies far beyond normal human limits. And most horrifying of all, voluntary amputations became commonplace. Soldiers would willingly sacrifice a limb to have it replaced with a cybernetic one, often designed and built during the invasion itself, specifically to counter Union tactics. A Union medical counselor stared at the incoming data, her face pale with horror. "They're not adapting to survive," she whispered to her staff. "They're adapting to kill us faster." The Deathworld Council, an assembly of the oldest and wisest species in the Galactic Union, convened in an emergency session. Every elder species was present. They dusted off ancient warnings and reread forgotten records. They remembered the old file simulations of first contact with humanity, run by long-extinct empires, programs that were terminated early, not because the humans lost, but because the simulations couldn't find a scenario where the humans could be stopped once they started fighting back. A gray-haired counselor, his voice heavy with dread, finally spoke the words that no one wanted to hear. Humans are not the deadliest creatures because they are the strongest or the most advanced, he said, his voice echoing in the silent chamber. They are the deadliest because they escalate without limit. They have no ceiling. As if on cue, a flood of new reports came in, each one more alarming than the last. Human cyber warfare units had breached the Union's command, not with superior code, but by feeding them contradictory data, paradoxes, and pure logical nonsense until the crashed under the strain. Human fleets, now a bizarre mix of their own ships and captured Union vessels, began using alien weapons in ways their creators had never intended. They pushed the systems far past their safety limits, accepting catastrophic failure and the loss of the ship as a valid tactic if it took an enemy with them. One Union admiral, watching his fleet get torn apart by these insane tactics, summarized it perfectly. They treat survival as optional. The war lasted for 6 weeks. At the end of it, Union space was still largely intact, but Union pride was shattered beyond repair, and Earth still stood. Not because humanity had conquered the galaxy, they had no interest in that. They had made a single, unforgettable point. The final transmission came not from a warship, but from Earth itself. A human female, her uniform damaged, a smudge of dirt on her cheek, appeared on screens across the galaxy. She looked tired, but she offered a small, calm smile. "We didn't want this," she said, her voice steady. "But if you insist on making us your enemy, understand something." She leaned forward, her smile vanishing, her eyes hardening into steel. "You didn't start a war with a Deathworld species." She paused, letting the silence hang in the air. "You started a war with the apex predators who evolved on one end, then left it behind." The transmission ended. Across the galaxy, in every military academy, textbooks were quietly updated. Under the entry for humanity, a new classification was added, a stark and simple warning for all future generations. Do not provoke, do not corner, do not ever start a war. The galaxy had learned its lesson the hard way. The deadliest creatures were no longer trapped on their Deathworld, they were humanity itself, and they were now among the stars. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more content. See you next time.